The war room in Tokyo buzzed with excitement on that spring morning in 1942. Japanese officers gathered around large maps spread across wooden tables. Red flags marked their conquests across the Pacific. Singapore had fallen. The Philippines were theirs. Hong Kong, Wake Island, Guam, all captured in just 4 months. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stood quietly in the corner, away from the celebrating officers. He was 57 years old with a stern face and tired eyes. While others laughed and congratulated each other, he stared at a map of the United States hanging on the wall. General Hideki Tojo entered the room with confidence in his step. He was the prime minister and the most powerful man in Japan. Other officers immediately stood at attention. "Gentlemen, the American Navy lies at the bottom of Pearl Harbor," Tojo announced proudly. "Their spirit is broken. Their President Roosevelt speaks of fear itself because that is all they have left, fear." The room erupted in applause. Young Commander Minoru Genda, who had helped plan the Pearl Harbor attack, smiled widely. "Sir, our Zero fighters are unmatched. American pilots flee when they see us coming. We control the Pacific Ocean now." Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, who had personally led the attack on Pearl Harbor, nodded in agreement. The Americans lost 8 battleships in one morning. It will take them years to recover if they ever do. Yamamoto finally spoke. His voice was quiet but commanded attention. "I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with terrible resolve." The celebration stopped. Officers looked at each other in confusion. Tojo frowned. "Admiral Yamamoto, surely you do not doubt our glorious victory?" Tojo asked with an edge in his voice. Yamamoto walked to the map of America. He pointed at different locations. "I studied at Harvard University. I served as a naval attaché in Washington. I have seen their country with my own eyes." He pointed at Detroit. "Here they build automobiles in factories that run 24 hours a day. I watched one factory produce a complete car every minute." His finger moved to Texas. "Here they pump more oil in one day than we pump in a month." He traced his hand across the map. "They have more steel, more coal, more copper, more of everything than we can imagine." A young officer interrupted boldly. "But Admiral, Americans are soft. They love jazz music and Hollywood movies. They are not warriors like us." Another officer agreed. "Their soldiers will not fight with our spirit. They value their individual lives too much. We value honor and are willing to die for the Emperor." Yamamoto turned to face them. His expression was dark. "Do not mistake patience for weakness. Do not mistake love of peace for inability to wage war. I have given our military leaders 1 year, maybe 18 months to win this war. After that, I can guarantee nothing." "How can you say this?" Tojo demanded. "Look at our victories. Look at how much territory we control." "Territory means nothing if you cannot hold it," Yamamoto replied. "America has 130 million people. We have 70 million. Their economy is 10 times larger than ours. When they fully commit to war production, they will bury us in ships, planes, and tanks." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. No one wanted to believe such words. Lieutenant Hiroshi Nakamura, a young intelligence officer, sat at a desk in the back of the room. He had been studying American newspapers and reports that Japanese spies sent from America. The numbers he saw frightened him. After the meeting ended, Nakamura approached Yamamoto privately. "Admiral, I have compiled reports about American factory production. May I show you?" Yamamoto nodded. They went to a smaller office. Nakamura spread papers across the desk. "Sir, American shipyards are building what they call Liberty ships. These are cargo vessels to transport supplies. According to our sources, they have developed a new method of welding that allows them to build one complete ship in just 3 days." Yamamoto's eyes widened. 3 days for a ship? That is impossible. I thought so too, sir. But multiple sources confirm it. They are building them in sections like assembling a toy. Before the war, it took them 200 days to build one ship. Now they do it in 72 hours. Yamamoto sat down heavily. "How many shipyards do they have doing this?" 18, sir. And they are building more shipyards. The admiral did quick calculations in his head. If America could produce one ship every 3 days from each shipyard, that meant over 2,000 ships per year. Japan's entire merchant fleet was only about 6 million tons. America could replace their entire Pacific fleet losses within months. "Have you reported this to General Tojo?" Yamamoto asked. Nakamura looked down. "Yes, sir. He said it was American propaganda. He said Americans are trying to frighten us with false numbers. He ordered me not to spread such lies. But you do not think they are lies, no, sir. The reports come from too many different sources. Our spies in California, our diplomats in neutral countries, even German intelligence confirms American production is extraordinary. Yamamoto stood and walked to the window. Outside, Tokyo looked peaceful. Citizens celebrated recent victories. They did not know what was coming. Lieutenant Nakamura continued gathering intelligence on American production. Bring every report to me directly. Do not let others dismiss these numbers. Yes, sir. But Admiral, what if they do not listen? What if High Command refuses to believe the truth? Yamamoto was quiet for a long moment. Then we will lose this war, and the fault will be ours for starting a fight we could never win. That night, Yamamoto wrote a letter to a friend. In it, he expressed his deepest fears. The victory at Pearl Harbor was tactical, but strategically it may prove to be our greatest mistake. We have not sunk their will to fight. We have awakened it. I see difficult times ahead for our nation. Meanwhile, across the Pacific Ocean, American factories were already transforming. Car manufacturers stopped making automobiles and started building tanks. Radio factories began producing communication equipment for soldiers. Women who had never worked outside their homes were learning to weld, rivet, and assemble weapons of war. President Roosevelt had given orders. America would become the arsenal of democracy. Production goals seemed impossible, but American engineers loved solving impossible problems. Back in Tokyo, young officers continued celebrating. They believed victory was certain. They did not see the storm gathering on the horizon. Admiral Yamamoto saw it clearly. The sleeping giant was waking up, and it was very, very angry. The Japanese aircraft carrier Akagi cut through calm Pacific waters on June 4, 1942. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stood on the bridge, looking at three other carriers sailing beside him. Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. Together they formed the most powerful naval strike force in the world. These same carriers had attacked Pearl Harbor 6 months ago. Nagumo felt confident. His mission was to capture Midway Island, a small American base halfway between Japan and Hawaii. Intelligence reports said American forces were weak and scattered. This would be another easy victory. On the carrier's deck below, maintenance crews worked on aircraft. Pilots played cards and joked with each other. These were veteran aviators who had fought in China and throughout the Pacific. They believed they were invincible. Lieutenant Tominaga led a bomber squadron. He checked his watch. Soon they would launch the attack on Midway Island. After destroying the base, they would return to their carriers for refueling. Then they would hunt down any American ships foolish enough to appear. What Nagumo did not know was that American codebreakers had read Japan's secret messages. Admiral Chester Nimitz knew exactly where the Japanese fleet would be. 3 American carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, were already waiting in ambush. The morning attack on Midway went as planned. Japanese bombers hit the small island hard. But the pilot who led the attack radioed back. Second strike necessary. American defenses remained strong. Nagumo faced a decision. His aircraft carriers had planes armed with torpedoes ready to attack any American ships that appeared. Should he keep those torpedoes? Or should he change the weapons to bombs for a second strike on Midway? He decided to change the weapons. Crews rushed to remove torpedoes and attach bombs instead. The carrier decks became cluttered with weapons, fuel hoses, and ammunition. Then the worst possible news arrived. A scout plane reported 10 enemy ships sighted, including what appears to be a carrier. Nagumo's blood ran cold. American carriers were nearby. Impossible. Intelligence said they were nowhere near Midway. He immediately ordered crews to stop changing weapons and put the torpedoes back on. Now the decks became even more chaotic. Torpedoes, bombs, and fuel lines lay everywhere. American torpedo bombers attacked first. They came in low and slow. Japanese Zero fighters shot them down easily. Of 41 American torpedo bombers, 35 were destroyed. Not a single torpedo hit a Japanese ship. Japanese officers celebrated. The Americans fly like children. One pilot radioed. They have no skill, no courage. But the American torpedo attacks had accomplished something important. They pulled all the Japanese fighter planes down to low altitude. The carrier's decks were still covered with planes, fuel, and weapons. And high above, where no one was watching, American dive bombers arrived. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey led 37 dive bombers from the Enterprise. He had been searching for the Japanese fleet for hours, running low on fuel. Then he spotted a Japanese destroyer speeding north. He followed it. The destroyer led him straight to the carriers. What McCluskey saw below shocked him. 4 aircraft carriers in a neat formation, their decks packed with planes being refueled. It was a perfect target. "Attack!" he ordered. The dive bombers screamed down from 20,000 feet. On the Akagi's bridge, a lookout finally spotted them. "Dive bombers!" he screamed, but it was too late. The first bomb hit Akagi near the center elevator. It penetrated to the hangar deck, where armed and fueled aircraft waited. The explosion was massive. Fire spread instantly. Within minutes, the entire carrier was engulfed in flames. Kaga received 3 direct hits. Bombs exploded among the planes, torpedoes, and fuel on the deck. Massive secondary explosions tore the ship apart. Soryu took 3 bombs in rapid succession. Fire reached the fuel lines. The carrier became an inferno. All this happened in 5 minutes. 3 carriers destroyed in less time than it takes to drink a cup of tea. Admiral Nagumo stood on the Akagi's bridge, surrounded by fire and smoke. "How is this possible?" he whispered. His staff had to drag him off the ship. He transferred to a cruiser and watched his flagship burn. Only the Hiryu remained undamaged. Her captain launched an attack that crippled the American carrier Yorktown. But American dive bombers found Hiryu in the afternoon. 4 bombs turned her into a burning wreck. By evening, all 4 Japanese carriers were sinking or abandoned. Japan's most experienced carrier pilots were dead. These men had trained for years. They could not be replaced quickly. Back in Tokyo, Lieutenant Nakamura received the first reports. His hands shook as he read. 4 carriers lost, over 300 aircraft gone, more than 2,000 sailors dead. He rushed to Imperial headquarters. The High Command met in emergency session. General Tojo's face was pale. Other officers shouted in confusion and anger. "How could this happen?" one general demanded. "Our intelligence said the American carriers were far away." "The Americans knew we were coming," another officer said quietly. They set a trap. Admiral Yamamoto arrived late to the meeting. He had been at sea aboard the battleship Yamato, too far away to help at Midway. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were haunted. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, "we have lost this battle. More importantly, we have lost the strategic initiative. From this day forward, America will dictate where battles are fought. But we still have more carriers," a young officer protested. "We can rebuild." Nakamura stood up with his latest intelligence reports. "Sirs, if I may, American shipyards currently have 7 new carriers under construction. They will all be completed within 18 months. We have 2 carriers under construction, and they will not be ready for 2 years. The room went silent. General Sugiyama studied the pilot casualty lists. These pilots who died at Midway, they had an average of 5 years of training and combat experience. "How long does it take us to train a replacement pilot?" The Naval Aviation Commander answered reluctantly. "Minimum 2 years for basic competency, sir. 4 to 5 years to reach the skill level we just lost." "And how long does it take America to train a pilot?" "We estimate they are reducing training to approximately 6 months, sir." 6 months? Tojo stood up angrily. "That is impossible." "They will send children into combat." "Yes, sir," the commander agreed. "But our intelligence reports show they are building so many aircraft that pilot skill matters less. They can afford losses we cannot." Yamamoto spoke again. "I told you we had 6 months to 1 year to win this war. Midway was fought exactly 6 months after Pearl Harbor. We have now lost our advantage. Every day forward, America grows stronger while we grow weaker." Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who had led the Pearl Harbor attack and survived Midway as an observer, entered the room. His arm was in a sling from injuries during the battle. "Tell us what you saw," Tojo ordered. Fuchida's voice was hoarse. "I saw American pilots attack with determination I did not expect. Their torpedo bombers came at us knowing they would die, just to distract our fighters. It worked. Then their dive bombers appeared and destroyed us in minutes. The coordination was perfect. But American pilots are inferior to ours," an officer insisted. "Perhaps individually," Fuchida replied, "but they had something we did not expect. They had radar on their ships. They knew exactly where we were. We were fighting blind while they could see everything. This was new information. Radar was a technology Japan had not fully developed. Nakamura presented more intelligence. "Sirs, American factories are now producing combat aircraft at a rate of 4,000 per month. Our production is approximately 400 per month. Someone did the math. 10 to 1? That cannot be accurate. It is accurate, sir. And their production rate is increasing every month. By next year, they may produce 60,000 aircraft in 12 months. The officers sat in stunned silence. The numbers seemed impossible, but multiple intelligence sources confirmed them. Tojo stood and walked to the map. We must increase our production immediately. Double our output. Triple it. The Minister of Industry spoke sadly. Prime Minister, we lack the raw materials. Our steel production is limited. We have oil reserves for perhaps 18 months if we are fortunate. America has unlimited resources. That night, Admiral Yamamoto wrote another letter. Midway has taught us a bitter lesson. American forces are learning quickly from their mistakes. Their junior officers show initiative and courage. Meanwhile, our irreplaceable veterans are dying. The mathematics of this war are now clear, and they favor our enemy completely. In American shipyards, workers celebrated the Midway victory by working even harder. New carriers, battleships, and cruisers took shape on assembly lines. The sleeping giant was fully awake now, and it was building an unstoppable war machine. The jungle on Guadalcanal Island was hell on earth. Rain fell constantly. Mosquitoes carried malaria and dengue fever. The heat made steel helmets feel like ovens. And through this misery, Japanese soldiers fought Americans for control of a single airfield. General Harukichi Hyakutake commanded Japanese forces on the island. He stood in a muddy command post reading reports by candlelight. The news was always bad. August 1942 had become October, and the Americans were still there. What was supposed to be a quick victory had turned into a nightmare. We sent reinforcements last night, his aide reported. American destroyers intercepted our convoy. 3 transport ships sunk. Only 300 soldiers made it to shore out of 2,000. Hyakutake slammed his fist on the table. How many ships do the Americans have? Every night they bombard us. Every day their aircraft attack. We shoot down 10 planes and 20 more appear the next morning. The aide had no answer. Neither did anyone else. In Tokyo, the high command met almost daily now. The confident smiles from earlier in the year were gone. Maps showed American forces pushing closer to Japan from multiple directions. Lieutenant Nakamura, now promoted to commander, presented his latest intelligence report. The numbers were staggering. Gentlemen, American aircraft production has reached 5,000 per month. They are building 1 aircraft carrier every 8 weeks. They have launched what they call the Essex-class carriers, bigger and more advanced than anything we have. Admiral Minechi Koga, who replaced Yamamoto after his death in April 1943, studied the photographs Nakamura provided. Japanese spies had smuggled pictures of American shipyards. The images showed massive construction, dozens of carriers, hundreds of destroyers, and thousands of landing craft all being built simultaneously. Where are they getting all this steel? An officer asked in disbelief. America produced 81 million tons of steel last year, sir. We produced 5 million tons. The officer sat down heavily. The ratio was impossible to comprehend. General Sugiyama spoke next. Our submarine forces report American convoys are now protected by dozens of escort ships. We sink 1 cargo vessel and 3 more take its place. Meanwhile, American submarines are destroying our cargo ships faster than we can replace them. This was a critical problem. Japan's oil came from the Dutch East Indies. Steel came from Manchuria. Food came from across the empire. All of it had to travel by ship. American submarines were strangling these supply lines. How many cargo ships have we lost? Tojo asked, though he dreaded the answer. Since the war began, over 800 ships totaling 4 million tons, sir. Our shipyards cannot keep pace with losses. Commander Nakamura added more bad news. American Liberty ships are now being produced in 42 days on average. Some shipyards have built one in under 2 weeks. They launched over 1,400 cargo ships last year alone. 1,400 ships in 1 year. Japan could not build 1,400 ships in 5 years with their current capacity. The meeting turned to Guadalcanal. General Hyakutake had sent desperate messages. His troops were starving. Disease killed more men than combat. American forces grew stronger every day while Japanese forces withered. We must evacuate Guadalcanal, Admiral Koga said. We are losing men and ships in a battle we cannot win. Evacuate? Tojo stood angrily. The Emperor does not order retreats. Then the Emperor will watch his soldiers die for nothing, Koga replied calmly. We have already lost 24,000 men on that island. American reinforcements arrive daily. They have air superiority. They control the seas around the island. Every supply run we attempt costs us ships and men we cannot afford to lose. The Emperor's personal advisor spoke quietly. Perhaps tactical withdrawal would allow us to establish a stronger defensive line elsewhere. This was careful language. They could not say defeat or retreat directly, but everyone understood. Japan was losing Guadalcanal. In February 1943, Japan evacuated the island. They called it a strategic repositioning. In reality, it was their first major land defeat of the war. American forces now had a base from which to attack further north. Commander Nakamura compiled a comprehensive report about American military production. The numbers seemed like fantasy. American aircraft production for 1943, 96,000 planes. Japanese aircraft production for 1943, 18,000 planes. American tank production for 1943, 29,000 tanks. Japanese tank production for 1943, 3,000 tanks. American naval construction, 8 fleet carriers, 9 light carriers, 47 escort carriers, plus hundreds of destroyers and submarines. Japanese naval construction, 1 fleet carrier, 3 light carriers, and fewer than 50 destroyers. The High Command reviewed these figures in silence. The mathematics were impossible to ignore. America was outproducing Japan by a ratio of 5-to-1 in aircraft, 10-to-1 in tanks, and 20-to-1 in ships. How is this possible? A general asked quietly. They are fighting in Europe as well. They are sending supplies to Britain, to Russia, to China, and they still produce more than us? Nakamura had prepared for this question. He pulled out more photographs. These images show American factories. They operate 24 hours a day in 3 shifts. Women work alongside men. They have automated assembly lines that we cannot match. Their welding techniques are faster than ours. Their management methods are more efficient. One photograph showed a factory floor with hundreds of aircraft in various stages of assembly. Another showed a shipyard with 6 carriers being built simultaneously. A third showed thousands of tanks lined up outside a factory, ready for shipment. They are treating war production like they treated building automobiles, Nakamura explained. Henry Ford's assembly line methods are now making bombers instead of cars. The Boeing factory in Seattle employs 30,000 workers and produces 16 B-17 bombers every day. 16 bombers per day? Someone whispered. We build 16 bombers per month, Admiral Koga spoke grimly. I visited America before the war. I toured factories. I saw their capability, but I never imagined they could mobilize this completely. Every factory has converted to war production. Every citizen is involved somehow. They have harnessed their entire economy for war. General Anami, who would later become war minister, asked the question everyone feared. Can we win this war? No one answered immediately. Finally, Koga spoke. If the war ended today, perhaps we could negotiate favorable terms. We still hold much territory, but if this war continues another year, 2 years, no, we cannot win. The longer it continues, the stronger America becomes while we grow weaker. Then we must sue for peace, an officer suggested. Tojo's face turned red. Never. We will fight to the last man. Japanese warriors do not surrender, but others were beginning to doubt. They saw the intelligence reports. They knew about the supply shortages, the fuel crisis, the lack of replacement pilots and ships. They understood the mathematics of industrial warfare. That night, several senior officers met privately. They discussed things that could never be said in official meetings. One admiral spoke the forbidden truth. We were wrong. We thought Americans were soft and divided. We thought their democracy would make them weak. We were catastrophically wrong. Another added, we believed our warrior spirit would overcome their material advantages. But you cannot fight steel with spirit. You cannot fight factories with bravery. Yamamoto tried to warn us, a third officer said sadly. He told us we had 6 months to win. We ignored him. Now we face an enemy that grows stronger every day while we slowly starve. They agreed to document everything carefully. Future generations needed to understand how this happened, how Japan had started a war against an enemy whose power they completely misunderstood. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, American factories roared day and night. New carriers slid into the water. Bombers rolled off assembly lines. Millions of young American men trained for combat. The sleeping giant was not just awake, it was becoming an unstoppable force. Admiral Koga looked at maps showing American advances. They were coming from the south through the Solomon Islands. They were coming from the east across the Central Pacific. They were coming from the north through the Aleutians, and Japan's ability to stop them was shrinking daily. He thought about Yamamoto's words. "We have awakened a sleeping giant." Now he understood completely, and it terrified him. June 19, 1944. The Philippine Sea sparkled under bright sunshine. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa commanded 9 Japanese aircraft carriers, the largest carrier force Japan had assembled since Midway 2 years ago. This was Japan's final chance to stop the American advance. Everything depended on this battle. Ozawa had a plan. His aircraft had longer range than American planes. He could strike first while staying out of range of American fighters. His pilots would attack the American fleet, land on Guam to refuel, then attack again on their return flight. It was brilliant in theory. What Ozawa did not know was that American technology had improved dramatically. Their new F-6F Hellcat fighters were faster and more powerful than older models. American radar could detect Japanese planes from 200 miles away. And American pilots, though less experienced than before the war, had been trained in new tactics that maximized their advantages. The Japanese attack began at 8:30 a.m. Ozawa launched wave after wave of aircraft. His pilots were younger than Midway veterans with less training, but they were enthusiastic and brave. American radar detected them immediately. Fighter controllers vectored Hellcats to intercept. The result was catastrophic for Japan. American pilots called it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Japanese planes fell from the sky in clusters. Experienced American pilots shot down plane after plane. The new Hellcats were superior in every way. They were faster, climbed better, and could take tremendous damage and keep flying. Lieutenant Zenji Abe led a bomber squadron. He watched in horror as American fighters tore through his formation. "They are everywhere," he radioed. "Where are our escorts?" Japanese Zero fighters were trying to protect the bombers, but they were overwhelmed. American pilots worked in teams using radio coordination that Japanese forces could not match. When one Hellcat attacked, his wingman covered him. They had practiced these tactics for months. By afternoon, Japan had lost over 300 aircraft. American losses were 43 planes. Many American pilots shot down 5 or more Japanese planes in a single day, but the disaster was not over. American submarines had been tracking the Japanese carriers. At 9 a.m., submarine USS Albacore fired torpedoes at the carrier Taiho, Japan's newest and largest carrier. 1 torpedo hit. The damage seemed minor, but gasoline vapors from ruptured tanks began filling the ship. Hours later, a spark ignited the fumes. The massive explosion tore the carrier apart. Another submarine, USS Kavala, torpedoed the carrier Shokaku. Explosions ripped through the ship. She sank in the afternoon. The next day, American search planes found the remaining Japanese carriers. Admiral Mark Mitcher launched 216 aircraft in a long-range strike, even though it meant his planes would return after dark, something American carriers had never attempted in combat. The American attack overwhelmed Japanese defenses. 2 more carriers, Hio and Zukaku, were sunk. 2 others were badly damaged. American pilots faced a dangerous night landing back on their carriers. Admiral Mitcher made a bold decision. He ordered all ships to turn on their lights, making them visible to Japanese submarines, so his pilots could find their way home. "We will save our boys," he declared. Most pilots landed safely. Some ran out of fuel and ditched in the ocean, but destroyers rescued them. America could afford to risk ships to save pilots. Japan could not. In Tokyo, the High Command received reports of the battle. The room fell silent as officers read casualty figures. 600 aircraft lost. 3 carriers sunk. 2 damaged. Nearly 2,000 pilots and aircrew dead. Admiral Toyota sat with his head in his hands. "We trained those pilots for 2 years each. They are irreplaceable." Commander Nakamura presented the comparison. "Sir, American pilot training has been streamlined to 6 months. They lose experienced pilots just like we do, but they can replace them quickly. We cannot. 6-month pilots should be inferior," an officer protested. "They are inferior individually, sir, but they fly superior aircraft in superior numbers with superior coordination. Individual skill matters less when you have 10 planes for every one of ours. The officer who had served as naval aviation advisor spoke bitterly. The Americans have developed a training system that produces adequate pilots rapidly. We still train pilots the old way, slowly, carefully, perfectly. By the time our pilots are ready, the war situation has changed. Their pilots are in combat 6 months after joining the Navy. Ours take 2 to 3 years. General Anami reviewed economic reports that civilian officials had finally shared with military leaders. The news was devastating. Japan's oil reserves were nearly depleted. The Dutch East Indies still produced oil, but American submarines sank tankers faster than Japan could build them. Steel production had fallen to 30% of 1941 levels. Aluminum was scarce. Copper was almost gone. Food shortages were spreading across Japan. Rice rations were being reduced again. "We are running out of everything," Anami said quietly. "Fuel, metal, rubber, food. Even if we wanted to build more ships and planes, we lacked the materials." Nakamura presented the latest American production figures. "Gentlemen, the Americans completed 12 aircraft carriers in 1943. This year they will complete 22 carriers. Next year their production will be even higher." 22 carriers in 1 year? Someone whispered, "Yes, sir. Their Essex-class carriers are larger and more advanced than our best ships. Their Independence-class light carriers are built on cruiser hulls using modular construction. They build them in 9 months. Photographs showed massive American shipyards. One image displayed 6 escort carriers under construction simultaneously in one shipyard. Another showed dozens of destroyers lined up like toys. They are also building a new battleship class," Nakamura continued. "The Iowa class. Each ship is faster than our battleships and has heavier armor and bigger guns. 4 are already in service." Admiral Toyota studied the images. "I commanded a battleship squadron. I thought we had the finest naval vessels in the world. These American ships are superior in every way." The fall of Saipan in July 1944 brought even worse news. Saipan was only 200 miles from Tokyo. American B-29 Superfortress bombers could now reach Japan's home islands. The first B-29 to fly over Tokyo appeared in November 1944. It was a reconnaissance flight, but it proved American bombers could reach Japan with ease. Japanese fighters climbed to intercept, but the B-29 flew at 32,000 feet. Too high for most Japanese fighters to reach. Even those that reached that altitude had no oxygen for pilots and could barely maneuver. "How are we supposed to defend against these bombers?" a general demanded during an emergency meeting. "We have no effective defense," the air defense commander admitted. "Our best fighters can barely reach their altitude. Our anti-aircraft guns cannot reach them. We have no radar systems comparable to American radar." Tojo had resigned after Saipan fell. The new Prime Minister, Kuniaki Koiso, faced impossible situations. The emperor himself was asking difficult questions about the war's progress. In a private meeting, the emperor's closest advisors spoke openly for the first time. Prince Konoe, who had been prime minister before Tojo, expressed what many thought but dared not say publicly. "We have lost this war. The only question is how it ends. Do we continue until every city burns and every citizen starves? Or do we seek peace while we still have something to negotiate with?" An elderly general who had fought in the Russo-Japanese War 40 years earlier spoke sadly. "In 1905, we defeated Russia because we understood our enemy. We knew their weaknesses and exploited them. In this war, we understood nothing about America. We saw their jazz music and Hollywood movies and thought them decadent. We saw their labor strikes and thought them divided. We saw their preference for peace and thought them cowardly. What we did not see," another advisor added, "was that Americans had been holding back. Once fully committed to war, they applied their industrial genius with devastating effect. They mass-produce ships like we mass-produce rifles. They train pilots like we train infantry. They have turned warfare into an industrial process, and we cannot compete." Commander Nakamura had compiled what he called the mathematics of defeat. It was a careful analysis comparing Japanese and American production across every category. Aircraft. America produced 300,000 combat aircraft during the war. Japan produced 76,000 ships. America built 141 aircraft carriers of all types. Japan built 16 merchant ships. America built 400 cargo vessels. Japan built 800. The ratios were crushing: 4-to-1 in aircraft, 9-to-1 in carriers, 7-to-1 in cargo ships. Even if every Japanese pilot was superior, Nakamura explained to senior officers, even if every Japanese ship was better designed, we cannot overcome these numbers. America simply has too much of everything. Admiral Yonai, who had opposed war with America from the beginning, spoke the truth that others avoided. Yamamoto told us we had 6 months to 1 year to win. He was exactly correct. We won early battles but lost the strategic war. Every month that passes, America grows stronger and we grow weaker. This is mathematics, not opinion. General Anami looked at casualty reports. We have lost our best pilots, our best commanders, our best ships. What remains are brave men with inadequate training, old equipment, and no hope of replacement. We send them to die knowing they cannot win. That night, several officers met in secret. They knew the war was lost. They knew Japan faced complete destruction, but they also knew that suggesting surrender meant death. The military code of honor forbade such thoughts. Officers who spoke of peace were labeled as traitors and often assassinated by fanatics. What do we do? One asked. We know the truth, but we cannot speak it. We document everything, another replied. We record the numbers, the decisions, the mistakes. Future generations must understand what happened, how we started a war we could not win, how we ignored every warning, how pride and ignorance destroyed our nation. Outside the meeting room, Tokyo continued its blackout routine. Citizens waited for American bombers that would surely come. Food was scarce, fuel was almost gone, hope was dying, and across the Pacific, American factories continued their 24-hour production. More ships, more planes, more bombs. The industrial machine that Japan had awakened was now unstoppable, and it was coming to Japan's doorstep. August 6, 1945. The sky above Hiroshima was clear and blue. At 8:15 a.m., a single American B-29 bomber named Enola Gay released its payload. 43 seconds later, the world changed forever. In an underground bunker in Tokyo, the High Command waited for reports. Communication with Hiroshima had gone silent hours ago. Initial reports were confused and contradictory. Some said the entire city had been destroyed by a single bomb. This seemed impossible. Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo received the first detailed report late that evening. His hands trembled as he read. 1 bomb. An entire city destroyed. 70,000 dead instantly. Fires burning for miles. Survivors report a flash brighter than the sun, then a mushroom-shaped cloud reaching into the sky. The meeting room fell silent. No one spoke. How could 1 bomb do this? Japan's largest conventional bombing raids used hundreds of planes dropping thousands of bombs. 1 bomb could not destroy a city. But the reports kept coming, all saying the same thing. Admiral Toyota studied photographs taken by reconnaissance planes. Where Hiroshima had been, there was now mostly rubble and ash. A single bomb had done what normally required months of conventional bombing. What kind of weapon is this? Someone whispered. Commander Nakamura had been investigating this question for months. Japanese intelligence had picked up hints that America was developing something called an atomic bomb. Most officers dismissed it as propaganda or science fiction. Nakamura had not. Sirs, American scientists have been working on a weapon using atomic fission, Einstein's theories about converting matter to energy. German scientists were also researching this before their defeat. We have known about this possibility for over a year. Why did we not develop such a weapon? Togo demanded. Japan's chief scientist spoke sadly. We lack the resources, Minister. Such a weapon requires enormous industrial capacity, vast amounts of electricity, rare materials, and thousands of scientists working for years. America has all these things. We do not. Could we build such a weapon now? Admiral Yonai asked. Not in 5 years, sir. Perhaps not in 10 years. America built this weapon in 3 years while simultaneously fighting wars on 2 continents. That alone demonstrates the gap between our industrial capabilities. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second atomic bomb destroyed Nagasaki. Another 40,000 people died instantly. The message was clear. America had more of these weapons and would use them until Japan surrendered. The same day, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Manchuria. The Red Army, battle-hardened from defeating Germany, overwhelmed Japanese forces in China. This was the final blow. Japan now faced atomic bombs from America, an invasion from Russia. The Supreme War Council met in the Emperor's bunker deep underground. These 6 men would decide Japan's fate. 3 wanted to continue fighting. 3 wanted to surrender. The emperor would break the tie. General Korochika Anami commanded the army. He argued passionately for continuing the fight. We have 2 million soldiers ready to defend the home islands. We can make the Americans pay dearly for every inch of ground, Admiral Yonai countered quietly. And what will they pay with? More atomic bombs? They have already shown they will use them. How many cities must burn before we admit defeat? Foreign Minister Togo added, Gentlemen, I have reviewed all intelligence reports. America is preparing for Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan. They are assembling 30 divisions, thousands of ships, tens of thousands of aircraft, and our intelligence indicates they have allocated 9 atomic bombs for use during the invasion. 9 atomic bombs. The room absorbed this information. If 2 bombs destroyed 2 cities, what would 9 do? Our coastal defenses are strong, Anami insisted. We have thousands of kamikaze pilots ready to die for the emperor. We have civilians training with bamboo spears. Bamboo spears against atomic bombs? Yonai said sadly. General, please. We are military men. We understand mathematics. Our oil is gone. Our navy is destroyed. Our air force is nearly gone. American submarines have cut off all supply lines. Civilians are starving, and now they have weapons that can erase cities in seconds. Commander Nakamura presented his final report. He had spent years tracking American capabilities. Now he shared everything he had learned. Gentlemen, American production continues to increase even as the war winds down. They completed 300,000 combat aircraft during the war. They built 88,000 tanks. They constructed 141 aircraft carriers. They produced 2,800 Liberty ships. They trained 16 million soldiers. He paused to let the numbers sink in. In comparison, we built 76,000 aircraft, 6,400 tanks, 16 carriers, and trained 6 million soldiers. In every category, they outproduced us by 5 to 1 or 10 to 1 or more. But our soldiers have superior spirit, an officer insisted. Spirit does not stop atomic bombs, Nakamura replied. Spirit does not create fuel from nothing. Spirit does not feed starving children. We have tremendous spirit, but our enemy has unlimited material resources. In modern war, resources matter more than spirit. An elderly general who had served since the Russo-Japanese War spoke. In 1905, we defeated Russia because we understood our enemy and exploited their weaknesses. We knew Russia's supply lines were impossibly long. We knew their fleet was divided. We knew their government was unstable. We used these facts to win. He looked around the room sadly. In this war, we understood nothing about America. We thought they were soft because they enjoyed jazz music. We thought they were weak because they preferred peace. We thought their democracy would make them divided and slow to act. We were wrong about everything. Admiral Yonai agreed. Americans do prefer peace. But once committed to war, they wage it with total industrial efficiency. They did not just fight us. They buried us in ships, planes, bombs, and bullets. And now they have atomic weapons that make our defenses meaningless. Foreign Minister Togo spoke directly. I have studied American demands. They want unconditional surrender, but they have indicated the emperor may remain. If we continue fighting, they have made clear they will use atomic bombs and conventional bombing to destroy every city in Japan. Then they will invade. Casualties on both sides will be in the millions, and we will still lose because we have no way to win. Surrender is dishonorable. General Anami shouted. Is it honorable to let millions die in a war we cannot win? Togo shot back. Is it honorable to sacrifice every Japanese citizen for pride? The argument continued for hours. Finally, they turned to Emperor Hirohito. In Japan's entire history, the emperor had rarely made direct decisions. But this moment required his voice. The emperor spoke quietly. I have listened to all arguments. I understand the desire to continue fighting. Our soldiers have shown incredible bravery, but I cannot allow my people to suffer further. The enemy has a weapon we cannot defend against. Continuing the war means the extinction of the Japanese nation. I choose to accept the Allied surrender terms. Some officers wept. Others sat in stunned silence. General Anami left the meeting and later committed suicide, unable to accept surrender. On August 15, 1945, the emperor's voice was broadcast on radio across Japan. It was the first time most Japanese people had heard their emperor speak. In formal, archaic language, he announced Japan's surrender. In the bunker, remaining high command officers gathered one final time. They spoke honestly now, knowing the war was over. "How did this happen?" a young officer asked. "We won every early battle. We had superior pilots and ships at the beginning. How did we lose so completely?" Admiral Yonai answered. "We won battles but lost the strategic war. We thought destroying battleships at Pearl Harbor would demoralize America. Instead, it unified them and awakened their industrial power. We thought Americans valued individual lives too much to wage total war. We were wrong. Once committed, they waged war with absolute determination. We also fundamentally misunderstood American capacity," Nakamura added. "We thought they would need years to recover from Pearl Harbor. They needed months. We thought their democracy would make them slow and inefficient. Instead, their free market economy adapted to war production faster than our controlled economy could. And we ignored warnings," another officer said quietly. "Admiral Yamamoto told us we had 6 months to win. He was exactly right. After Midway, the strategic initiative passed to America. Every month afterward, they grew stronger while we weakened." "Why did we not listen to Yamamoto?" the young officer asked. "Because we did not want to believe him," Yonai replied. "We wanted to believe our spirit would overcome their material advantages. We wanted to believe our warriors were superior. We wanted to believe Japan was invincible. Pride and wishful thinking led us to disaster." Commander Nakamura held up his thick folder of intelligence reports. "I compiled every report about American production for 3 years. Every report showed the same thing. America's industrial capacity was overwhelming. But most officers dismissed my reports as propaganda. They did not want to believe we were fighting an enemy with 10 times our resources." "What did we learn?" the young officer asked. An old general answered. "We learned that in modern war, industrial capacity matters more than warrior spirit. We learned that underestimating your enemy is fatal. We learned that Americans, when fully committed, are perhaps the most dangerous enemy in the world. Not because they are naturally warlike, but because they can mobilize resources on an unprecedented scale. We also learned," Admiral Yonai added, "that Americans wage war differently than we do. We focus on honor, sacrifice, and dramatic battles. They focus on logistics, production, and systematic destruction of enemy capabilities. They turned war into an industrial process. Every battle was calculated to maximize their advantages while minimizing their losses. They had better technology too," someone mentioned. "Yes," Nakamura agreed. "Better radar, better radios, better aircraft design, better ships. They innovated constantly. When their torpedo bombers proved vulnerable at Midway, they developed better fighters. When their torpedoes failed in 1942, they fixed the design by 1943. They learned from mistakes and adapted quickly." "And the atomic bomb?" the young officer asked. "How did they develop that?" the chief scientist spoke. "They mobilized their best scientists and gave them unlimited resources. Thousands of people worked on the Manhattan Project for 3 years. They built entire cities just to produce materials for the bombs. Only America had the resources to attempt such a project during wartime." Foreign Minister Togo looked at the maps on the wall, now marked with occupied territories across Asia and the Pacific. "We must also acknowledge the moral dimension. We invaded other nations and ruled them harshly. We told ourselves it was to liberate Asia from Western imperialism. But in truth, we created our own empire. Those nations celebrated our defeat." The room fell silent. These were difficult truths. Finally, Admiral Yonai spoke the summary that others were thinking. "Admiral Yamamoto tried to warn us. He said attacking America was a mistake. He said we might win early battles but would lose the long war. He was completely correct. We mistook American patience for weakness, their preference for peace as inability to fight, and their diverse democracy as a source of division rather than strength." "The sleeping giant," someone whispered. "Yes," Yonai agreed. "We awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with terrible resolve. That giant had unlimited factories, unlimited resources, and unlimited determination. We never stood a chance in a long war. Our only hope was a quick victory, and we failed to achieve it." Commander Nakamura closed his folder of intelligence reports. He had spent 3 years documenting America's capabilities. 3 years of being ignored and dismissed. Now everyone understood, but it was too late. "Will future generations learn from our mistakes?" the young officer asked. "Perhaps," Yonai replied. "If we record the truth honestly. If we admit our errors. If we explain how pride and ignorance led us to disaster, never again should Japan underestimate an enemy or start a war based on wishful thinking rather than facts. Outside the bunker, Japan lay in ruins. 66 cities had been bombed. Tokyo was mostly ash. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were gone. Millions were dead. The empire was lost. All because Japan's leaders had failed to understand the power they challenged. Years later, historians would analyze the Pacific War. They would marvel at how completely Japan misunderstood American industrial capacity. But those in the bunker that day needed no historians. They had learned the lesson directly, painfully, and completely. They had finally understood American power, and that understanding came at the cost of everything.